Hi there, I'm Brian Max with Quixel Video, and I'm going to introduce a new product that we have available from our website, the Photoshop CS Capabilities Video Training for Mac and Windows. I present hours of training where you can learn the new and traditional features of Photoshop CS and ImageReady CS in really the fastest way possible, and it's great real-world type training. It's made for everybody, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it at the end of this particular video segment. But first I'm going to introduce the project that you have available there on your disk, the Image Restoration Project. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to take this dark image here, which was shot about 8 years ago, as the sun was going down without a flash using a disposable camera, and it came out really dark. It was a dark time of the day, but it was a wonderful particular moment, and we want to spice it up and have something that looks a lot better. We're going to turn it into, this is one of the pictures that we're going to turn it into. Here's another. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a lot of different filters and adjustments and new and traditional features of Photoshop, particular Photoshop CS, and we're going to use some other techniques to really improve this image, because the before aspect here, the before image, is not really something we can use. It's almost to the point that we have to really throw it out unless we do something in Photoshop. Now, the videos are about an hour, and we're going to definitely make some key adjustments to this video to really bring out the features. We didn't actually draw anything here. We just used some adjustments, some filters, and some other techniques to really bring out what detail is in the photograph to begin with. And we also cleaned up some imperfections. So let's get started with this training and find out some really interesting things we can do. Now, also, in the training that you can receive from our website, we're actually going to take another photo here. You can see typical example of a time of day where there's no light, there's no sun reaching into this little area. It was actually within a castle, and it was blocking the sun, so there was no light there. The person was actually far away. The camera needed to be zoomed in. So when you do all of those things, you wind up with a picture on the right, because you don't have enough light, and then you're zooming in, you're not going to get enough light. You're going to be dealing with actually what you have here. It wasn't a professional moment. We all know it. We go on vacation, and you want to be Joe Photographer, and everyone else with you is like, well, just take the picture. We want to go on and do something else. Everyone's on vacation. They want to relax. So you wind up with pictures like this. But with a little bit of work when you get home, using the color replacement tool, we can make changes to the wall here and to the bush. We can bring out the wonderful aspects of the rock here and make some changes to the subject here to liven things up and to brighten things up and to have a picture really you could print and put into the photo album. We also clean up quite a bit of imperfections that were lying around. So this is another project that we're going to include on the training disk, and I look forward to you visiting www.quixelvideo.com to find out more information about that particular training. But I'm also going to give you a little bit of information here. Is the brochure that's on your disk that came with the project, the hour of tutorials here, and you can just open it up and follow along with me if you like. Now what this training does is it teaches you Photoshop CS and ImageReady CS the way that programs were meant to be taught. It also allows you to get up to speed with Photoshop CS using new and traditional features to really get in there and learn the application right now, get to work, get your workflow increased into the new functionality, and then you can just breeze through Photoshop and really be creative. Many times you buy the upgrade to your product, or you're new to the product, or you're coming from a different product, and you start using the application, and before you know it, a whole year goes by, and you haven't really taken advantage of anything new. Maybe you haven't had the time, maybe you haven't had a need to work with the new product yet, and the new features yet, and you basically start using it the way you used the old application. Now, if you don't get great performance boosts from the new application, then you wonder why you upgraded it to begin with if you're not using the new features. The second page here, and see that we cover quite a lot of information here. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And you can see that we cover just about anything you can think of in Photoshop CS. And we also include a lot of training on ImageReady CS. We're going to go over color theory in depth, the interface, color management for the Mac and the PC. And the videos aren't specific to just the PC or just the Mac. You actually get to see examples and tutorials in both the Mac and the PC versions, and it really helps out everybody. I basically use the two products on both platforms, and I decided to put together videos that are going to be for everybody, no matter what platform you use. And also I give you all the differences across the platforms and how to effectively use both platforms. We completely cover the new interface enhancements, all the metadata enhancements, the history log, the new file dialog box, 16-bit editing. These videos are actually done in 16-bit editing and all the benefits there. Completely cover the file browser, which I think is very important because it helps you increase your workflow. We're going to completely cover the Camera Raw plugin, which is really fantastic. It's updated quite regularly. I'm going to give you the details of what it is, what you need to know about it, why it's important, and what the different formats are that you can actually record to, and how you can actually work with Camera Raw to really make things better for your digital photography. You're basically working with the digital negative. We're going to get into all the different aspects of what Photoshop CS is geared towards, and that is graphic design, where we do many different type examples and layer comps, which allows you to present different images to different clients, and you can output to PDF or to files, all different types of things, and other workflow enhancements. We're also going to cover digital photography in depth, and as well in this video here particularly, we're going to cover the new image interpolation modes, all the different automation and adjustments that you can make, the different effects that you can work with, shadow highlight just like we're doing now, and so many different other things like panoramas and the filter gallery, which we're also going to get into in this particular set of videos. We'll cover web and multimedia from the aspect of Photoshop and ImageReady CS. ImageReady CS definitely helps you out a great deal. And finally, for video professionals, Photoshop CS has been enhanced to really help out with the non-square pixel aspect ratios, which are common with DVD type output. We're going to cover action and title safe areas, show you how to work with images meant for video, as well as give you a lot of video and multimedia tips as well. You can't forget scripting, and I'm a big scripter, so I'm going to really get into scripting and automation in Photoshop CS and show you how you can improve things. I sort of look at this as a bonus because it's something that you can definitely work with. Not everybody is a scripter or programmer. Since I have a background in that as well, I'm going to explain things and how to work with things within Photoshop CS, especially the automation that's already built in, like PDF presentations, multi-page PDFs, and a whole lot more. Bonus projects, as you're watching now, and additional ones that we're going to add that I described earlier in this video, as well as other benefits, bonuses, and videos that you can really start to master Photoshop CS. So I welcome you to check out our website, www.quixelvideo.com, and check out the Photoshop CS capabilities training. I really look forward to you getting involved with Photoshop more and learning as much as possible, and I'm excited about our new workflow and how we actually are improving our videos with every video release that we present to our customers. And I'm really excited about this particular project that we have. So let's get started and jump right into the training. So what are we going to do with these pictures here? You see we have a lot of dark pictures here. We're actually going to open them in preview. It's a lot easier to start that way. The one on the left here at the top and the one on the right here at the bottom, these are the same pictures, just scanned differently. Now, this I scanned in a poor way, some dust and some other imperfections on the image here. So we're going to actually go in and clean up the image. We're also going to make it a lot brighter using some of the new features. We're also going to add an artistic flair to the image and do a whole bunch of different things to the image to make it look a lot better than this. Now, what happens usually when you take some pictures? Usually, depending on how good you are, you go ahead and snap some pictures. Maybe you bring a small camera with you on vacation. Maybe you ran out of film and the only thing you can get is one of the disposable cameras, which have pretty good quality. You're using that for your vacation shots. You take some pictures. The time of the day perhaps is coming down to twilight and the light's disappearing. Maybe it's a little bit rainy, maybe it's a little bit murky, like this top picture here. And you get home, develop the roll because you're not using a digital camera. You have a whole bunch of pictures that aren't so good. You have 10%, 20%, 50%, maybe even more, 80% that are good. But then you have these other pictures laying around and they actually accumulate. You have a lot of pictures that you could improve. And if you have some time and some energy, you can improve that photo album and get those pictures online or print it out and create more memories. So that's what we're going to do with this first image here, as well as the second image. We'll concentrate on the first in this particular example. We're going to use some of the new and some of the old features of Photoshop and make things look wonderful. First thing we're going to do, we're just going to crop this down. Right now we're showing the grids and extras. We're going to get rid of that from the view menu just so we can see the image. We're just going to select our image here. Make sure we get in there. We're just going to do an edit copy. We're actually going to create a new image, 300 dpi, based on that image there. You can look in the image size and see that this was a much larger, 25 megabytes about for the image size. And we have the resample image in the bicubic normal. You know that there are two new modes here, the bicubic smoother and the bicubic sharper. Smoother is a better algorithm for actually increasing the size or going up, scaling up in an image. And bicubic sharper is actually for reducing an image. So you can actually work with these two filters to get a better effect instead of the standard bicubic, which is the best. So you may want to experiment with those two different interpolation modes if you're not going to be using the bicubic standard. So we're going to work in 16-bit mode. We can close this now. We bring in the other image. And you can see that the colors are a little different because the images were scanned differently. What we're going to do is we're going to actually go through some settings here, and I'm going to show you how you can save your settings and how you can reuse your settings and things like that. You have to realize that any slight variation in your image is also going to play a part in changing those settings that you're actually going to be working with or saving. And you're going to have to make the adjustments, and oftentimes things don't necessarily work like you want them to. Just something we're going to say in the beginning because we're going to do a lot of different types of filters and image manipulation, and it's definitely going to become important that I mention that. There is a new tool, and we're not going to use it with this particular image, but in the Automate, File Automate, you have this crop and straighten photos. Now, you might think that this is something that you can use on just about any image, and it depends. You notice that this background has a very, very dark background, and it's hard to tell between black and even some of the darkest colors here. So watch the effect that you get if you do use this particular feature. We're going to use it on a different image, as you're going to see in another example. But I am going to show you how the crop and straighten would affect this image. As you can see, the image is actually split up into two different pictures here, two different images. Because of the dark parts of the image, the actual green parts that are black almost, this part of the image is very dark, so Photoshop actually split the image up into two images. It got confused a little bit. This is not the effect that you want. If you're going to scan your images, it might be good to scan your images with a neutral color, meaning a piece of paper placed over on top of your image, as long as you don't have any shadows towards the outside. That way you're having a more neutral image, and you're able to distinguish the background from the actual image. And that can help your workflow. If you want to have a speedy workflow, it's definitely something you want to look into. Anyway, so that being said, we're going to have to crop and straighten this ourselves. So what we can do is Image, Rotate Canvas, and you can actually put in an arbitrary amount here. That's one way to do it, but that's not the best way to do it. Edit, Transform, Rotate. And what we're going to do, we have these rotation points around the image. Now, we could just make a change. We see that we might not be able to get exact. We're going to add a little helper here. You can have your ruler set. Make sure your ruler's on. And then you can bring down a guide. You can also look at the grid selection in the View menu and show your grids. You also want to have Show Guides enabled as well, so we can see them. You can use the grid to help you. I think that's a little bit too much for this example. Hard to see. We're just going to work with a guide. And we're not going to try to be perfect in this example. So I'm going to do some quick and fast types of filtering and processing. But overall, I'd say 90% or higher, this image is going to look its best. So then we go back to our rotate, transform, rotate. And we'll just make it reasonable. You can actually zoom in there and make it really, really tight. And then you double click on the image. Now we want to crop. We want to clear that information up in the cropping. Just hit the clear button. And then we can have a freeform crop. We're just going to crop around the image, including the ever important sky. Double click. And we have a nice cropped image. And we don't need this guide anymore. The guide can go. See, we're off a little bit here. A little bit rotated because the shot actually wasn't shot very, very straight with the camera. It was done by hand, very fast. So what we can do is we can actually rotate a little bit more. And we'll crop a little bit more. If you hold down the Control key, you can get pretty precise there instead of snapping. It's looking pretty good. Basically what we want. Very, very dark. So let's work with it. Let's get it to look the way we want it. do a little fit to screen here. So what's the first thing that we want to do here? Well, the first thing, you want to set up your preferences a little bit here. On Mac, that would be in the Photoshop Preferences menu. And then you would just select your General Settings. You want to increase your history state. You can also change your image interpolation here, so when we make changes throughout the image, we can use a different interpolation method. Bicubic better is just as I mentioned before. Our history state, this is going to actually create many different ways that we can undo. And you can see that this will remember certain levels of history for us, starting from the new document on down. Something else you want to work with, you want to add metadata to your actual file. So we can go in and click File Information here, File Information. And you can look in the history, see that we have some information saved in this image, starting with the paste, creating a new image, pasting into the image, creating our guide, cropping, everything's there. What we need to do is we need to set up our application so that we're actually recording that information. And how you do that is in the preferences. But a little bit more about the file information. Now, what you can do with this file information dialog box is you can add information about your image here, and then you can use the file browser and find images that have certain keywords and other types of metadata. You can also share the information with others if you share the PSD file that we go over in the full Photoshop CS training that we have available coming up on our website. We'll go back into the Preferences, Photoshop Preferences, and on the Windows you're going to go from the Edit menu. So what we have here in the General tab once again, History Log. You want to turn on your History Log if you want to save this information. What we're going to do is we're going to save the log items to the metadata in the file. You can just do it to a text file, or you can do it to both. And we'll do it to both. The metadata is the area that we were already looking at, and concise or detailed. We're going to create detailed so we can get all the information about changes that we make, including the actual settings, the values that you would set for the different filters and image manipulation tools. And now we're also going to save this because we don't want to lose anything. Call it Landscape 1. Maximum compatibility. We want to maintain maximum compatibility. This is also something that you can turn off in your preferences. What this is going to do is it's going to allow the previous versions of Photoshop to also open the file. You can turn this off as we move forward, but you can see that you can have this set in the Preferences, File Handling, File Compatibility area. We'll maintain that. This is something that's always going to pop up for you unless you turn that off in the Preferences. Now before we lighten this image up, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to save this sky here. We're going to make some changes to all the different areas of the sky, and what you really want to take into consideration is that this image is broken up into 5 different parts. We have the sky, the tree area, the woods, mountain area, water, and then our rocky beach. Now, you can see that there are just a bunch of lines here. This line here separates the green area, or it's more like a triangle here. You have your sky here, another line separating that here, and then you have another line which separates the water, and then this line separates the water from the rocks. So everything is kind of neatly placed here, and this is another reason why we're going to turn this into a nice artistic type display, more of an artistic painting, as it were. The first thing we need to do is to actually save the sky. So we're going to take our magic wand tool here. You can hit the W key as well. Going to change our tolerance to 25. I know that tolerance is going to select a good amount of the pixels. You can see where it cuts off based on the color. We're going to use the Shift key to multi-select. And trust me, 25 is pretty good. You can experiment if you'd like. But what this does is it gives us the ability to select a certain amount of pixels here without overdoing it. We want the trees to blend in very, very nicely with the sky, and we don't want to lose any quality there. We're actually going to make changes to the sky, and it's really going to bring out the sky in such a way that if you looked at the image, the picture, and you looked really, really closely and you shined a light onto this dark picture, you actually will see that detail there. Photoshop can see the detail. It might not be interesting to you because it's just a dark image. Really zoom in there. You see that there's certain areas of sky here that we could add. This is really what we want to do. We just don't want it into the trees. To further refine, we can pick the rectangle marquee here. With the M key you can hit. What we're going to do is we're just going to continue to hold down the Shift key and just grab some more pixels in here. And it's easier than really getting in there with the magic wand. And if you're unsure, you can just take this. Whoops. Always make sure you have that Shift key down and undo when necessary, like I did again. Shift gets you that little plus sign there. You see we went over a little bit. If you're unsure that you're getting all the pixels, you can just select a whole area and add that. Now there are two different ways that we're going to save this selection, actually. You can actually go into the Select menu, and you can do Save Selection. And this will save the selection to this particular document, or you can do it to a new document if you'd like. It's actually going to save it to a new channel. Hit OK. The selection is saved. Another alternative method is to just copy merged or just copy for that particular layer. This is the only layer. With the selection selected, do an edit, paste, Control or Command V. And this is going to, if we bring up the layers, palette, this is going to create another layer with just the sky there. There you go. We don't need a background layer. We can just go ahead and delete that. We'll bring this up to the top. Just save that for later. If you hold down the Command key or the Control key on the PC and you hit the image here in the layer, you're actually going to do a whole selection. So that works just like actually creating a selection and saving it. So it can be very, very helpful for you. But right now we're not going to do that. What we're going to do, the new image manipulation feature in Photoshop CS, and that's going to be the new image adjustments shadow highlight functionality. selection here, we have shadows and highlights. This already, you can see, looks a lot better. You can see, if you've ever been to Ireland, you know it's very, very green, so it's not uncommon to see something to this effect with a range of greens. But you can see that we lighten things up a little bit by changing the shadows, adjusting the shadows. We haven't adjusted the highlights yet, but we can see that this looks a lot better. The image itself is going to be a little bit off here, not perfect, because increasing that information, increasing the data here, trying to pull more information out of these pixels, it's just going to overall give the image a very, very light effect. And this may not necessarily be what you want, but it's definitely going to have an improved look, very, very good improved look when we're all done with it. You can just take the defaults that Photoshop gives you. When you just bring that dialog box up, it's going to make adjustments for you. And you can just go ahead and use those if you like. There are more details of information here. You can see that the shadows and highlights now gets broken out into two separate items here, where we have an amount, our tonal width, the radius, and this works the same for the highlights and the shadows. And then you can do color correction and contrast correction as well, and this black and white clip at the bottom. And you can also just change the details there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in some settings, but we're going to save the settings, because as you can see, we have some problems here in our image. Little dust particles all over the image that we want to take care of first before we make any changes. That way, when we do make changes with other filters as well, these imperfections don't affect negatively our picture, because that's going to have an effect overall when we do an applying of the filter. You definitely don't know how those imperfections are going to work with the other parts of the image, because they're not really a part of the image. Let's just set things up. I already went through and did this example. I'm just going to give you an idea of what you can set up based on the settings. You can see that as far as the tones of the colors, and you would adjust this with the radius. But for the most part, we're just going to go through, make changes based on my experiments. Now, this is exactly what you should do. You don't just go in and plug in numbers based on what somebody tells you to put in. Each of your pictures are going to be different for the most part, and you want to just go ahead and experiment. You can see that now we just added some highlights. Whereas before, we weren't really dealing with the highlights. The highlights were turned off. We want to get the highlights that are there in the pictures. And as you can see, the higher we move, the more highlights we get. This is a very dark image, so we're just trying to do some extreme things here. You can also do this on the selection, but you can also see that the imperfections are going to stand out more. We're going to save that. This is just something that was on the scanner, and actually is a good example. So we'll just continue to make our settings here. I'm going to bump this up a little higher, 87%. Keep the tonal width the same, because it really just starts to get a little bit extreme here for us. Less is attractive as well. If you want to experiment, but we're going to leave it at 50. Now the radius, keep that at 30. And we have finally here the color correction. We're going to increase that. Now what we're really concerned with, you can see that this is going to desaturate the image, which doesn't necessarily look so bad as a black and white image, but we're going to really bump this up, because I like the misty mountain top right hand corner. we'll leave it at 63. We're going to adjust the midtones. That doesn't look so bad. We'll leave it at around -9. I'm really looking at creating an entire mood here with this particular image. And I really deal with the mountains and definitely the colors within the trees. So we'll leave everything else the same. So just to review, 49% for the shadows, 43 and 30, 87, 50, and 30 here. And then we really made some color correction here, and we reduced the contrast a little bit. We'll just save. Landscape 1. We'll just dump it on our desktop. We can actually create a folder at some point. So we save, and we're just going to cancel because, like I said, we want to fix the image first. This is our original image. You can tell this definitely doesn't look so good after we just saw that other image. And for the most part, the end image isn't actually where we want to wind up either. We want to use that as a interim, as a between thing. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to correct the image using the healing brush. There are little mistakes all over the place. Now, I'm not going to clean up everything here, but I'm going to clean up a good amount here. And we may fast forward things as well to make things easier on the tutorial. Now, with the healing brush, you're going to work with the normal mode and the replace mode most of the time. The normal mode is going to blend in the changes when you're actually going to start healing the image. You're going to blend the new changes in with the old changes, and the replace is actually going to replace the new area entirely. So what you do with the healing brush, this is a great way to actually so we just hit the Alt key on Windows or Mac. Now, this is the area that we're actually going to take the pixels behind this funny looking cursor here. We're going to click it once while we're holding down the Alt key. That's how we select the area that we're going to start using as our healing area. And then you just hit the regular mouse click to make the changes there. You can see that the crosshair cursor is where it's going to select the pixels from. And if we do something over here, you can see that this will move with us in the area. And it's actually going to modify the image based on that change. So we just got rid of that bit of flaw there. So let's just go through and change. I'll talk throughout the changes that I make. But for the most part, you might have seen that already. This is not a new feature. This is something that we're going to be working with. Color replacement tool is a new feature, and that's something we're going to also look at. With that, you actually can replace colors by just drawing or wiping along the picture, and it'll actually replace colors that you select and put a new color in there to make things look really, really nice. So we'll just hit the Alt key again, select this area. We're going to just get rid of this because I know already that that's going to be something that's going to be annoying later, because not everything here in your picture, and we want to periodically save as well. Not everything in your picture is something that's going to have a positive effect on what you're trying to do. And you can just go around. You know the sky looks pretty much the same. If things don't work out for you, then you can just do the undo as you wish. For instance, that didn't do too well for us. We'll do an undo. Get closer to the pixels that you want to change, and you'll get a more desired effect. Maybe we can use the normal mode here, because we're actually using the replace mode there. And this will blend things in a little bit better, as you can see. Instead of replacing the area, you can do this at will, really. Now, if you zoom in, you might not notice this when you print out or use this image. You want to really get in there and try to remove the dust as much as you can. You also want to wipe down your scanner and your images before scanning. Photoshop really helps you out. You can actually change the brush size here. We're also going to be working with the dust and scratches removal filter coming up in a little bit, and I'm going to show you how to do this much easier with a very nice effect. You never want to do too much, actually, but sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you get a good effect. Since we're blending, we're not experiencing too many problems there. And you can see this can be time consuming. If you start with a clean image, you're going to have best results. And we'll zoom out here. This is our big mistake here that we need to fix. And you can see with a combination of effects, you can get in there and make some nice changes. Now, for the most part, this image looks pretty good now. Now, knowing that I'm going to be adjusting these colors dramatically, you can even get rid of some of the lighter rocks that are a part of nature there that may give you a different effect that you're not looking to do. Okay, so here's our image. Looks clean, and we're just going to save. Okay, so now let's go back in to the image, adjustments, shadow, highlight, and reapply our setting. There's our defaults again. Let's load our settings. We have our dramatic image that, as you can see here, it really looks a lot better than it did before, and we're going to get even better. We'll just show you the before and after. So we still have some work to do, but it looks a lot better. It's starting to look like a painting a little bit, in my opinion. This is something dramatic that you might expect in a painting. Changes that we had here, they're starting to look a little bit dusty up there. So you can actually do some post-healing if you'd like, or go back and do some pre-healing and then reapply your settings there, because they all look like dust scratches here. Like I said, this is a dirty image, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to always select exactly. It depends on what kind of results you get there. You see, as long as you don't overlap something of the green into the sky and things like that, you should be okay. Now I'm going to leave it like that for the most part. We only have so much time to actually do this tutorial, but you can see that that can negatively affect your image, and we'll leave that as an exercise. So, there we go. Image looks pretty good. I like it. We'll save again. You can see that we have a low contrast image here. It's not a lot of changes in varying degrees, and the depth is affected a little bit here because of the flatness of the image. Let's just make things better. Now we can also see here, we are going to fix this one though, just really quickly. For the most part, we're in pretty good shape. Now, we can see here that we do have a lot more green. Our misty mountains here are starting to come out with very, very nice shades of blue there. Very, very appealing. The water here itself doesn't look so great. It looks like it's a bit muddy. It's blending in with the rocks here. It's not really the effect that we want to have there. What we're going to do is we're going to select the water here. Now, I'm not trying to be perfect in this example. Maybe you should when you're working on it. But I'm just going to use the lasso tool. Let's just go through and start with the left here. I'm going to actually select as much water as possible. We're just going to cut it off here and go back and do the other side as well. Alright, so we have half the water selected there. We can refine that as well. Going to use the Shift key. Continue our journey if you don't have so much real estate like I do for this recording machine. The mouse gets in the way there. So you can actually do it in sections if you like. Make things easier on yourself. And you can zoom in to different areas. I'm going to select an area to remove. Shift key to add an area. It's pretty good. We're just trying to get out of that rocky area as best as possible. For the most part, you get the idea. Okay. So we have our water selected. You can go ahead and save this selection too. Saved within the file, we'll call it water. So now we're going to make this look more like water. We're going to go into the hue and saturation, image adjustments. There's actually a shortcut key, Command or Control U. And we're going to just make some settings here. We're going to actually preview this in a colorized state. So we're going to change the 207 8 for the saturation, and then 6 for the lightness. We're going to make it a little bit lighter. Now, because we're colorizing it, the hue is going to change the color there to different hues. If you don't choose to colorize, it's not going to have such a drastic effect on the colors there. You can see this area here is something that we could change if you'd like. It's going to stand out to different areas that may not be a uniform color there. Water reflects light, so this is obviously going to be reflecting something in the area, probably the trees, depending where the sun is. And this is just how we would make changes to the lightness and darkness and how saturated an image is. Towards the left is a flat image without a lot of color. Towards the right is highly saturated, more colors are added. So we go back to the colorized version, add our setting values that we had there, 8 and 6. Now we can go ahead and deselect, or you can do another copy of the selection. Just to save it there, if you'd like. And you could do that before we change the saturation so you can see the difference if you'd like. But it's not going to be important. Just get rid of those two. Keep our selected image. Now you can see it looks more like water. Before it was pretty much looking muddy. Now we're looking at something that's more blue. So let's go back in and adjust our water again. So what I'll do is I'll do a couple step backwards here, which is going to get rid of that layer that we created there. It's going to return our water back to that murky looking type of water. And we're going to go in and make different changes to the hue and saturation. Remember, we still have that copy in the clipboard. So because we have that copy, we're going to actually paste it. We'll paste it on top. Now we can get a better look at it. So before, after. You can see the blue is definitely more blue. It's more what we're looking for. The spot of blue turned out to be something that we were very interested in anyway, so looks good. So what we can actually do is Command and mouse click there on that selection, and we're going to select a different layer, colorize, .286, saturation and lightness, and we're okay. Now we're going to adjust the color balance. Image adjustment, color balance. Now again, all of this is done through experimentation. You can't look at that image and say, okay, I'm going to do this to it. But through experience, you can start to work with the different adjustments and filters and things like that, and it gives you creative feedback based on your experiments. And I think that's important, just to play around with Photoshop and see how things are going to look for you. And that's really, really what you want to do overall. Now, before we do the color balance, we want to deselect actually. So we'll do a select, deselect, or Command Control D. Now we'll go into color balance. Turn off that water. First, we're just going to change the midtones here. You can see we get the automatic preview. And this is just what I came up with from experiment. We're going to be changing less red here and more towards the actual cyan colors here. To that degree, you can see this creates a hotter image. Now this might be something that you find to be good. We're just adjusting the colors here to fit our needs, to fit what we feel we want the color or the colors to look. You can see that this is a little bit more hotter. That's approaching the red. And the more up you go, the hotter it gets. We want something towards the cyan area. You can actually just bring something up this way, and this is actually something that's good. We can leave it like that. But for the experimentation type work, we're going to make that -31. A bit cooler. Now, we can also adjust the shadows. And you can see we get more contrast. This looks good as well. Depends on what you're looking to do. This looks richer. And what we have here is really approaching what was really the mood of the photograph or the actual view when we were actually standing out there looking out into the lake here. The sun's going down. This is pretty much what it felt like. This is more of a cool image. Now we can adjust the highlights. It gets a little bit brighter there. We don't want to overdo it because the imperfections of the photograph are going to start to come out more. Now, we could go with that. We could make things easier and actually make this a hotter image. Reduce the shadows. This would be something that I think would be ideal. Something that would be very good to continue the exercise or to leave it as is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit OK for this, make it a little bit hotter. You can see that some imperfections here and here a little bit if you have a good eye there. Leave it somewhere around here. And what we'll do is we'll duplicate this. Command or Control A. You can also use that Command or Control C for the copy. And we'll do a paste. Good thing is you can just have different images here that we can work with. We just pasted that in. Now we're going to do, we'll just do an undo here for now, just before we made that change. Step backwards. And this is going to step backwards in the history. We actually go over all the different history functionality, including the palette and everything else, in the full training available from our website. Stepping backwards and forwards. Now we can see this is where we need to be. You can also use the history panel, but I like using the step forward and backwards to a degree. This is the changes that we made. They look good. We have that layer. We'll paste it in. It's in there. We'll just preserve it. And we'll just work with the image that we have here. You can see it still looks good. It's a little bit more bluish green, which is not a problem. The hotter image is definitely something we can work with. Now we'll go select our layer, image adjustments, and we're going to actually just work with the example that I have here. Color balance, shadows, -1, 23, midtones, more towards cyan, a little bit of green, and more yellow. And just a little bit in the highlights here. Make it a little bit lighter. And we want to have the preserve luminosity selected. And we hit OK. So we have two different versions here. This a little bit more realistic. This a little bit more moody, but it is going to play an effect on what we're going to do later. So we'll just keep it there. And this is the one we're going to work with. You can name your layers. So this is our layer 1, but we'll just leave that for now. But you can name your layers while you're working, and it works things out a lot better. You can also duplicate layers by right-clicking on the layer and hitting the duplicate selection. Okay, so we have this greenish, bluish tinted image. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply some blurring to the sky. We're going to be making this look more like a painting, but you see there are a lot of imperfections as we really zoom in, and you really should take care of those in the image. You can see they all disappear. No big deal. But again, there's nothing we can do really because this image was scanned long time ago. The image was actually considered to be a loss because it was so dark. So we're going to select our sky so we can just find that layer. We'll name that sky. And we'll just select it. Then we'll Command or Control click it. We'll zoom out a little bit just to make some more room. And then we're just going to fit in there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to blur the sky. And we want to make sure we have this selected. We're going to actually duplicate the layer by right-clicking. Just make it a copy. Don't worry about the names. And now we're just going to filter, blur. You can see that because we're working with 16 bits here, you can see that you only have so many filters that you can actually work with. You can see the different ones that you can work with. Blurring and sharpening, erasing some noise. The dust and scratches can work on some of the scratches that we have there. This filter is actually going to help us out quite a lot right here. This is actually going to do a little bit of blurring, and you can see it has a really good effect here as we look. Without it, you can see we have a lot of different mistakes in the image. Even without anything here, we're going to select the default again. Primarily concerned with the sky. You can see it effectively blurs things out for us. Add a higher radius. Now I'm concerned with the tree area here. You can see it effectively gets rid of everything, makes things look pretty nice. So we'll hit OK. For the most part, our sky really looks better here, as you can see as we look around. We can actually add a little bit more blurring, as we're going to do with the Gaussian blur a little bit. As I mentioned before, my primary concern is the tree area here. This is why we have the selection, and we don't want to blur too much. We want this to blend together. And you can get the overall effect of the sky. These look like rain clouds now. Let's just do a before and after here. So you have to ask yourself the big question. Does it look good before or after? Not much of a change there from this distance. Changes that we have there, I think, are pretty good. So we'll keep them. Select, deselect. A little bit sharper. So that's up to you, but I like the way it looks. I think based on what we're going to be doing later, I think it's going to be a pretty nice effect. We have our image here. We're going to save. We haven't saved in a while. Okay, so we have our two images. This is what we came up with based on different color balance settings. And this is where we're at right now. So let's just work with a few variations here. Image, adjustment, can't do that. No variations. Why? Because you have a 16-bit image. So we would have to actually reduce to an 8-bit image, which is going to be less quality, but 16-bit workflow is still something that is not for everybody at the moment. So we can actually change our mode. We're actually going to change it to 8-bit. We just saved. You can see that changes to the image did take place. Less quality here. We're going to save as. Call it 8-bit. Now we can do our variations. Now this is great because you get to actually pick, once you select the original, sometimes you need to select the original here. You can see it starts to look like a painting here on the right hand side. It's lighter, but that's typical for a painting to be a bit lighter there so you can see all the details that you have there. I like it more yellow with some magenta. We can see our current image here. Now we're approaching what I had before with the color balance without having to change to a 16-bit image. And a little bit more blue, but we can start back again. Yellow, more magenta. It can be a little bit hotter if you'd like. You see the details of the sky start to really play into how this can look, and it looks more like a realistic image. And you can actually just hit OK. We're working with the midtones here. It's not exactly what we had before. It's a bit darker, but it's a bit bolder too. So this is something that you can work with. Now it looks more like the sun is there. It's actually off to the right, and even though the clouds give you a different indication there, but it's definitely something that we can work with, a much better looking image. So we have our 8-bit version, we have our 16-bit version. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add some more changes to the image. You can see that this is definitely not what it looked like at the moment that this was shot, maybe about an hour before, 45 minutes before, but it's definitely something that you can expect from a beautiful evening in Ireland. Now, let's go further and make this into an artistic type effect. Going to go to the filters. We can go to just the artistic filters here, or we can go into the filter gallery. The filter gallery allows you to combine filters and see the results right away in a preview. Now this is going to still show our little imperfections there, and you can see now that we're using a filter, you can see where all those little imperfections that are starting to stand out can come into play. You can wait till now to make some corrections. You want to scan better, but as an example, it starts to look better. Now when you do your selections, when you do your selections, the trees here, based on that original sky selection, this is why they look a little bit blurry up there, but you're not going to notice this generally depending on how you're printing the image. If you're using an extremely high setting for your print DPI, then if you look really closely, you'll see some defaults there, some imperfections there. But you want to work with that particular area to select different amounts of images there, different amounts of pixels, and make things look better as you see fit. But you can see the sky really doesn't look bad anymore at all. All of those pixels are gone. All those extra imperfections are gone. Mistake, this really doesn't look so bad. You can use the healing brush up here and make some changes. But let's add and look at some of these filters. You can actually add different filters as you see fit. This with a film grain looks pretty interesting. You can right click and do a fit to view. You can see things start to look a little bit stunning. Again, the water still is very high. You can select the water itself and bring it down. Now, if we pick the paint daubs here and we adjust the brush, you can start to see how this begins to look like a painting. And let's just hit OK with a sharpness of 10, brush size of 4, and we use the wide blurry brush type. A bit more like a painting, in between a little bit there. Just do a cut and paste. Oftentimes I do a paste just to make sure that I actually have something selected in the copy in the clipboard, and it's just something that I do normally. You can even just do the right click and duplicate your layers like I mentioned, or you don't have to do that extra paste. It's just really up to you how you work. And you can see it looks a lot better, or it looks pretty good. And you can go through and experiment. It's really up to you to experiment. You really want to get some good tests in there. And you can see we're a little bit blurry here. And here everything gets really, really sparkly and enhanced, more and more like a painting. Another one would be the brush strokes, which I find very, very nice. And an edge width of 4, edge brightness of 30, and smoothness of 5. An interesting effect. So very quickly, you see that we have many different ways that we can improve images that we have shot that necessarily aren't the best shape. If you look at this image and you look at the before image, you can see that we really, really improve things. You just want to watch out. Really can't compare the before to the after. Much, much better. You just want to watch out when you do print this to make sure that all the printed areas print the way you want before you waste a few sheets of paper. If you just find out what areas are the complex areas, you really, really begin to see that you can do some really, really nice, fantastic work. You can see still that this might present a little bit of problem, but you can actually get in there and work with those pixels themselves. It's not a big area. You can apply your filters in the beginning a little bit differently. A whole bunch of different things that you can do. Now, the great part about this, from the File menu, we're going to look at the history of the file, and you can see all the changes that you made to the image, right down to the pixels you selected, undos and redos. All that information is saved for you. Now, I'm not going to say that this information is going to be the easiest to work with, but it's definitely going to help you recreate what you did or tell others how you did it if you're having an artistic explosion. And it's also going to allow you to find out exact settings, color balance. We have our shadow levels, midtone levels, highlight levels, preserve, luminosity, all of that's recorded. And it's also recorded in the file that we saved on the hard drive. I hope you enjoyed this particular example. I think It's going to give you a lot of creative freedom, and I think it's really going to allow you to really become a much better Photoshop user in general. It's really going to let you work with those images that don't necessarily present enough information for you. You can see that if you were able to create a really detailed high megapixel image from the source, even if it comes out dark, it doesn't come out the way you want it to, you can actually really create something that you can put on your wall, depending on how many pixels you have to work with, depending on how you scale the image up, all different types of things. You can definitely see some value here. Now I would go through and rename your layers here just by clicking in and renaming things to signal the different layers that we have here. And if you just want to go ahead and print something that might look good on your computer, you can go back to this image, which was the additional color mode settings, and this will print rather nicely, come out quite nice. And you can also use the 16-bit image to print if your workflow supports it, and that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed the video training.